College was supposed to be a fresh start, but the past clung to me, a dark undertow beneath the surface. I wanted to escape, to finally be someone who could forget what I'd left behind. And it was easy at first to pretend. I was hundreds of miles from the house where I'd grown up, from the memories I tried so hard to keep buried. Around my new friends, I could be whoever I wanted. Tessa was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She had this untouchable confidence, a daring energy that felt contagious. Being around her felt like inhaling fresh air, filling my lungs with something I'd never known. We spent every night together, parties, late-night study sessions, lounging in her dorm surrounded by incense and laughter. I told her I'd never smoked before, never tried anything really. Her eyes sparkled at that as if I were some untouched canvas she couldn't wait to paint on. "You're like a blank slate, Sarah," she teased one night, passing me a joint, her grin widening. "Just waiting to live." And I wanted that. I wanted to feel alive, to drown out the whispers in my mind, the memories that lurked just beneath the surface. I took the joint, letting the smoke fill my lungs. I felt the world shift around me, everything softening, and it felt good, too good. Tessa leaned in close, that mischievous spark in her eyes. "Have you ever tried lucid dreaming?" I shook my head, exhaling a thin wisp of smoke. "What's that?" She grinned. "Oh, it's like magic. Imagine being able to control your dreams, to be whoever you want, do whatever you want. No limits. You should try it." Her words lingered in my mind that night, echoing as I lay in bed, repeating her instructions, letting myself drift. I focused on my breathing, sinking deeper, letting the haze take me. The first dream felt like stepping into a memory, but everything was wrong. I was back at the lake from my childhood, the one my family used to visit every summer. The water was dark, still, reflecting the pale light of the full moon. Everything around me was steeped in silver, cold and quiet, the air too thick to breathe. And then I saw her, a little girl standing at the edge of the water, her red dress billowing in the breeze, her hair wild and tangled, her face turned toward me with a smile that seemed stretched, unnatural. Her laughter echoed around me, too loud, reverberating off the trees and waves. She started running, her bare feet pounding on the muddy shore, and I followed, a sense of dread building in my chest. I tried to call her name, but no sound escaped my mouth. My throat was tight, my lungs heavy, as if I were drowning in air. Suddenly, she stopped, turning to face me. Her face twisted into something grotesque, her eyes dark and hollow, her mouth stretching into an unnatural grin. "Catch me, Sarah," she whispered, her voice echoing inside my skull, clawing its way into my mind. She took a step back and slipped, her small hands reaching out, grasping at nothing as she fell backward into the water. I ran forward, my feet sinking into the mud, arms outstretched, but she was already gone, swallowed by the darkness. Her hand slipped from my reach, her fingers curling like claws, her face disappearing beneath the surface. And then the water turned red. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The dream clung to me like a sickness, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth, the smell of lake water lingering in my room. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was just a dream, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw her. Her face, twisted and wrong, staring back at me, her mouth stretching into that same eerie smile. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the image of her face, that twisted grin haunting me at every turn. I tried to distract myself, to bury myself in classes and laughter with Tessa, but the shadows followed me. In empty hallways, I'd catch glimpses of her reflection, her small hand reaching out, always just behind me, just out of reach. I didn't want to tell anyone. Who would believe me? Even Tessa, with all her wild ideas and open mind, would laugh it off. So I kept it to myself, the nightmares growing heavier each night, pulling me deeper into memories I wanted to forget. The next time I tried to lucid dream, it was out of desperation, a need to understand. This time I found myself in my childhood kitchen, the faint smell of cigarettes and stale beer clinging to the air. My father sat at the table, his face cast in shadow, a bottle in his hand. He didn't look up when I entered, but I felt his presence like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating. He took a long drink, his movements slow, deliberate, his gaze fixed on something unseen. And then he spoke, his voice low, slurred, laced with bitterness. "Perfect, Sarah," he sneered, his words dripping with venom. "Off at college, living the life she never got." I opened my mouth to protest, to tell him it wasn't my fault, that I missed her too, but he cut me off, his gaze shifting to me, cold and empty. "You should have been the one to drown," he hissed, his face contorting into something monstrous. "It should have been you." His words twisted like a knife, cutting deeper than I'd ever imagined. I tried to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move, my voice caught in my throat. His face grew larger, distorting, his eyes hollow and black, his mouth stretching impossibly wide, swallowing the room, swallowing me. I woke up shaking, his words echoing in my mind. The line between dream and reality blurred, his voice haunting me even in the daylight, a constant reminder of everything I'd tried to forget. I could feel him watching me, judging me, his presence lurking in every shadow, every dark corner. The shadows followed me through my days. In the corner of my eye, I'd see her, the twisted face of my sister, her fingers reaching, her mouth curled in that silent scream. Reflections in windows showed my father's cold stare, his empty gaze locking onto me before vanishing in an instant. Their voices echoed in my mind, taunting me, reminding me of everything I wanted to forget. The nights brought no relief. The nightmares grew darker, more twisted, pulling me into memories I'd buried long ago. Each dream was a window into my past, a grotesque exaggeration of everything I'd lost, everything I feared. The third time I tried to lucid dream, I found myself at my sister's funeral. The room was filled with faces I didn't recognize, their eyes hollow, their expressions twisted in silent judgment. My mother sat at the front, her shoulders hunched, her face hidden in her hands. The air was thick, suffocating, the smell of flowers and decay filling my lungs. I walked closer, feeling a crushing weight in my chest, a sense of dread that made it hard to breathe. My mother looked up, her eyes red and swollen, her gaze empty, hollow. She didn't say a word, but I could see the accusation in her eyes, the silent blame she'd carried since that day. I tried to speak, to tell her I was sorry, but my voice was gone, my words swallowed by the darkness. The casket was open, Anna's small body lying inside, her face pale, her eyes open, staring at me with that same twisted grin. And then she sat up. Her body jerked, her head tilting at an unnatural angle, her mouth stretching wide in a silent scream. She reached out, her cold fingers wrapping around my wrist, pulling me into the casket, her eyes burning with rage. I woke up screaming, the memory of her touch lingering, a cold, dead weight around my wrist. I couldn't escape her, couldn't escape the nightmares that consumed me. They found me curled in a corner of my dorm, my eyes wild, my skin pale and clammy, barely able to breathe. I'd tried clawing myself out of this, ripping away at the memories that clung to me like parasites, but nothing helped. Every hour of every day I saw them lurking in every shadow, felt their eyes watching, judging, waiting for the moment I'd fall asleep. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spoken to Tessa. My friends were gone too. It was just me, and them. And I was too weak to keep running. I remember the sterile, fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway blurring as they strapped me to the gurney, my wrists held tight as though I were some dangerous animal. I could hear the doctors and nurses talking, their voices muffled, indifferent, while I pleaded with them, begged them not to make me sleep. But they just kept going, as if they couldn't see the shadows crawling up my skin, could never understand the horror waiting on the other side of my eyes. They led me into a small, stark room. White walls, white ceiling, empty. But to me it was filled with faces, eyes peering from every surface. Anna's voice echoed in my mind, whispering, "It should have been you." My father's sneer, my mother's silence, all of them waiting in the darkness. The nurse bent over me, syringe in hand, whispering, "This will help you relax." "No," I croaked, but the word barely made it past my lips. I could feel the cold needle pierce my skin, the sedative spreading through my veins like ice, pulling me down, deeper, into a darkness that felt endless. My vision blurred, the lights above me flickering, fading as if the entire room were slipping away, For a moment there was silence, a blessed nothingness that wrapped around me like a blanket. But then the darkness began to twist, to curl, forming shapes, faces, familiar and grotesque. They came out of the walls, pale and bloated, their faces distorted with hatred. Anna's dead eyes glared at me, her mouth stretched into that sick, knowing grin. She was joined by the others, my father, his face hollow and lined with rage, his words hissing through my mind like venom. "It should have been you." The walls of the hospital room melted away, replaced by the icy waters of the lake, the floor sinking beneath me as I felt myself drawn back to that place. That day. Anna's small hand gripped my wrist, her fingers cold as stone, her nails digging into my skin, pulling me down into the dark water. Her face loomed above me, her mouth twisting into a horrific, silent scream that echoed in the depths. As I sank, the lake stretched wider, a yawning black void filled with the faces of everyone I had ever loved or feared, their eyes glowing in the murky depths, their mouths open in silent judgment. My father, my mother, even faces I couldn't recognize. They were all there, reaching for me, dragging me down into an abyss that felt endless. I fought, gasping for air that wasn't there, my lungs burning, my mind unraveling as the memories twisted into a horrifying kaleidoscope of every mistake, every regret, every nightmare I'd ever had. The shadows crawled over me, suffocating, filling my mind with their voices, their accusations, their screams. Then, just as I thought I might drown, the lake floor gave way beneath me, and I fell, tumbling through an endless, pitch-black chasm. I could feel Anna's grip on my wrist, her laughter echoing in the darkness as I spiraled further into the void. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost, swallowed by the dark, a single note in an endless, agonizing symphony of horror. I fell forever. There was no end, no escape, only the eternal, relentless weight of the memories, the shadows, the faces that waited for me in the dark. I knew with a horrifying certainty that I would be here forever, trapped in a nightmare that would never end. And in that final, endless moment, as the last fragments of my mind splintered, I realized the truth. They hadn't come for me. They'd been waiting for me. I was theirs now, forever.